Welcome back. You're still watching OBG Talk. Still with us is Philippine Transmarine Carrier CEO Gerrardo Borromeo. Every time that one discusses the Philippine maritime industry, the same question rises. How can a country that is the leading provider of maritime professionals to the world can have so many challenges domestically, especially talking about the maritime safety record because of all the accidents that have happened, in history in this country. In which ways can the country work to address that maritime safety, and what sort of strategies could be put forward for that?
Rodrigo, it's a good question. Earlier we talked about how can we continue to encourage people to be involved in this industry. And one of the things to talk about is the fact that shipping is a global industry. And for us, what's more important to be able to continue that effort is to be able to raise the standards of the domestic shipping industry, because to us, it is the lifeline of our country. And if we can raise the standards of domestic shipping, it becomes a platform for development not only of people, but certainly becomes a more efficient mechanism for the transportation of goods and services, which can only redound to the benefit of our economy. So definitely what is very, very important today, given that we have a new government, is to be able to put the blue economy on the map. And the NEDA has already indicated that as far as the 10-point economic agenda of the Duterte government, that the blue economy is going to be put on the map. And that's very, very important because it becomes the platform by which trade and commerce will evolve. It's the platform by which people will have careers that they can be developed. Water and waterways become the source of food and minerals and energy. So we should treat our water resources as a critical component. And when we begin to do that, then the whole effort of the maritime industry and the marine environment is raised to a higher level. It is actually the underpinning. You name any industry, energy, the automotive industry, garments, electronics, to do all of the heavy lifting, you do require a central logistics facility, and that's what shipping provides. It does all the heavy lifting, and that's why, from PTC's standpoint, we think of this effort in shipping as moving the world.
Even if you can elaborate a little bit further in regards of what would a maritime policy look like that would address the sustainability of operations when it comes to shipping, it would raise the standards of the maritime industry. You mentioned the blue economy a little while back. What areas would it address, and to what extent can the standards of the industry be lifted?
Well, we first start by understanding water and waterways, and so be able to ensure the navigability of water, the safety of all operations, having a very strong domestic industry, having the ability to monitor that, a central maritime administration like Marina, but to continue to enhance its capability to not only look at international shipping, but also domestic shipping and all of the different elements that come with it. So the understanding and the appreciation by government is very, very important, because by elevating this and creating a framework by which the maritime industry is raised, the marine economy is improved and enhanced, just means that all of the different elements, whether you talk about shipping and commerce, the movement of goods, people development, shipbuilding and ship repair, for example, fisheries and food development, we have a fantastic opportunity in this country to be able to continue to move ourselves forward by leveraging on what we have available in terms of the marine environment and the marine industry. Not only domestically, as I mentioned, but more importantly internationally. It allows us to become a global player, and that is a significant step for this country as we evolve.
Even looking at something that gets consistently cited to have an impact when it comes to maritime safety, the modernization of the domestic fleets. The country still is plagued by second-hand vessels being imported from Japan, 35 years old. They're not purposely built. And to what extent can that modernization process be pursued, and what opportunities does it unlock for related industries like shipbuilding?
A lot. I mean, we have about 22,000 vessels that make up the domestic industry. About 15,000 are 500 deadweight tons or less. 7,000 are greater than 500 deadweight tons. And the whole opportunity to modernize these fleets will not only bring about better efficiency, but certainly the kind of safety and standardization that a traveler would want to have. And all of that is possible because we even have in the domestic industry today far-thinking visionaries. If you look at Archipelago and Starlight as operators, they have begun to modernize their fleet. So you have a lot of domestic leaders who are leading the pack, and I think that can only do well for this country.
The two cases that you mentioned, they're sourcing their ships from Japan and China. I mean, the country has already positioned itself as the fourth largest shipbuilder in the world. Looking at, having the domestic shipbuilding industry to play a more meaningful role when it comes to the modernization. What would it take to facilitate that process, and what sort of stakeholders would need to be taken into account to encourage that modernization?
Well, again, I go back to the fact that in our consciousness, starting with government and the private sector working hand-in-hand government, we need to elevate an interest and an understanding of what the maritime industry and the whole maritime economy or the marine economy can provide. By modernizing the efforts and enhancing shipbuilding, it actually creates an inclusive opportunity, because a lot of the skill sets that are needed are welders, fitters, machinists. A lot of these people are already working in very high quality environments overseas. As the local environment and industry picks up, these people who have already gone abroad, our maritime professionals, will have an opportunity to come back and share their craft and trade skills locally. But at the same time, it allows a new cadre of Filipinos who are aspiring to be global maritime professionals to also go outside. And so that whole cycle just means that we can double up on the number of people who can earn effectively and contribute meaningfully to this country. So when you think of the maritime industry and the whole marine economy, it actually creates a multiplier effect. It's an inclusive growth strategy that in the past has not been well appreciated, but the fact that NEDA has now recognized that the blue economy must be put into the 10-point economic agenda, for me, is the beginning of very, very interesting times ahead for this country.
One area that can be used to accelerate the strengthening of the domestic maritime industry will also be the strengthening of the flag registry. Over the years, it's dwindled in terms of in numbers. I think the current number is about 116. When you compare that to a country like Mongolia, which has 800 vessels under its flag registry, and it's a landlocked country, looking at Panama, 10,000 vessels under its flag registry, and probably at about 65% of the seafarers on board of those vessels are Filipinos to begin with. Some of the challenges to have, made the attractiveness of the Philippine Flag Registry more visible, and to what extent can that serve as an enabler for that the strengthening of the maritime industry?
Well, again, if we elevate the consciousness by government of the importance of this industry, as I said, we are already the #1 contributor of people. We can be attractive to ship owners in other ways. So having a very strong flag is very, very important. And what that means is it means potentially bringing in more investment and more money into this country to complement the over $6 billion that already comes in annually from seafarer remittances. To be able to do that, we need to do a couple of things. First of all, government must recognize that it has to be an attractive venue for ship owners. So streamlining procedures, having 24/7 capability to address any issue that comes up on the high sea, the ability to provide an admiralty court system to adjudicate issues involving ships, cargo, and people is very, very important. And as far as tax incentives are concerned, we don't have to look very far. We can look at what Panama, the Marshall Islands, Liberia, Singapore, Hong Kong, how they have become attractive centers for ship registry, incorporate the best of all of these policies, and put it out as far as the Philippines is concerned. That will involve the Department of Finance and discussing what kind of a tax regime would be very, very attractive. Normally it's called a tonnage tax or a flat tax. It also will require that in the hierarchy of liens, which involve the chattel mortgage of a vessel, because in many cases vessels we work with banks to finance the acquisition of new vessels, that the hierarchy of liens today in the Philippines, the chattel mortgage on a ship is number 6 or number 7, and that has got to be raised to about number 3, so that it can again be very similar to the way other flag registries set up their hierarchy of liens. When we can do that, then we become an attraction not only for ship owners but also for the banking community. And when you begin to put all of these different pieces together, there's no reason why the Philippines can't compete effectively. If we provide the people and if we provide the ships, again, it just mentions the fact that the maritime industry has a lot going for it. And ultimately, what I believe the Philippines can do is position itself as a maritime services center for the world. And we are already doing a lot of that in terms of the BPO industry. So we may not necessarily be a logistics hub like Singapore. We can be our own logistics hubs in many, many different ways. Certainly from the standpoint of maritime services, whether you talk about crew management, ship management, all of the back office efforts and support that can be provided, the Philippines can be #1 in that area. And then you add the aspect of shipbuilding and ship repair.
Right.
And all of a sudden, all of these different dots just means that the maritime industry is going to contribute meaningfully to our overall GDP, not just in terms of remittances, but investments, hard investments in physical assets and capability into this country. So I think that the future is very, very bright. And the fact that, again, the blue economy is now being considered as part of the 10-point economic agenda, that can only mean opening up of interesting opportunities in the future.
Just one last question in regards of what role does inadequate infrastructure on a nationwide level play as a disincentive for many ship owners to, make a significant investment into new vessels? Many complaints are usually around the fact that, the inadequate infrastructure of a port makes them use very inefficient, very expensive, smaller ships.
Yes.
How can this be pursued? I mean, it's an archipelagic nation that the safest and the most economical way of transporting goods across the archipelago would be through the sea lanes.
Yeah.
Any conversations that have been generated around this, and how can port development also serve as an enabler for this development?
Well, the thing to understand is that shipping will follow trade. And because we are an archipelagic country, the nautical highway is really the only way to connect and interconnect the islands. And so therefore, if we want to have more efficiency, then you have to create scale. And in creating scale, the way to go is to ensure that ports are not only going to be very efficient to handle all sorts of types of ships, the larger the better, but we also have to work our industrial policy and development policy so that we can cluster businesses and industries near the ports. We need to make sure that the highways that connect industrial estates to the ports are as efficient as possible.
Right.
We have to make sure that the procedures to get goods in and out of the port can be done very efficiently. So it's not a single point that is a problem. It is various issues. It's a very dynamic and challenging environment, but it can be done. And I go back to the fact that when we put the blue economy at the top of the economic agenda and create a maritime legislative agenda, it can only mean that all agencies of government will begin to see that the maritime industry, the marine economy, has a lot that it can offer our country. As I mentioned, our waterways becomes the platform for commerce, trade and commerce. The interconnecting links have to be set up efficiently in order to be able to provide scale. And when you provide scale, then your costs come down, which can only benefit the consumers. It becomes a level, it becomes a platform, particularly the domestic shipping industry, to create a stepping stone for international trade. And domestic ship owners, while they look at the domestic industry and the domestic opportunities as a source of business, we are interconnected with the rest of ASEAN. With ASEAN integration, we go back to what President Ramos had many years ago, which is the BIMPI IAGA, the growth area that covers Mindanao, parts of southern Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia. That is an area teeming with opportunity. So when you bring business and you bring prosperity, you bring peace and order. And all of these different elements, I think, are topics which the Duterte government has brought forward. And like I said, the maritime industry has so much that it can offer. You bring the blue economy to the top of the economic agenda, and you will be supporting all other industries as far as the Philippines is concerned. So that multiplier effect can only be beneficial for this country.
Thank you, Tito Borromeo, CEO of Philippine Transmarine Carriers.
Thanks, Rodrigo.
Thank you very much. This has been the OBG Talk in partnership with the ABS-CBN News Channel. I'm Rodrigo Diaz, and thank you for watching.